Good.
Welcome everybody in Facebook land. If you're watching this live, you get the behind the scenes backstage tour before we get started. Let everybody get queued up here. And if you're a Facebook person, thanks for giving us your attention. This is a topic that we get a lot of questions on. There's a lot of confusion on, so it'll be fun for us to unpack this with you. But we'll give us a few minutes here, and we will get this thing kicked off.
And as always, questions are very much welcome. So please use that Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen, and we will tackle those questions as we go.
Yeah, looks like we're getting a few people signing in. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Beautiful day here. Can't complain.
It is. Yeah, we had a long winter.
Yeah.
And a wet winter too, which is great after so many years of drought.
We'll take it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Very good. Well, yeah, college planning. I know funny thing about this is we're both kind of in this boat, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Kids of that age.
Yeah, definitely.
Multiples stacking on top. How do we make this work?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's that time of year. A client of ours said the other day, it's the 1,000 days of May, as all the activities tend to just bunch up at the end, graduations and gatherings and sports and kind of everything else that's going on, assemblies and award things and whatever. So fun time of year, but yeah, also college planning is on people's minds. I think for people that are having kids graduate, I'm one of them. One of my boys actually graduates here in a few weeks, so it's exciting. And I was just asking him the other day, did you get all your stuff in, right? Have you got all your housing applications in and all that stuff? So yeah, I think for a lot of people this time of year, and then as the school year actually gets started in the fall, it's top of mind. So we thought that this would be a good discussion for today.
Absolutely, submitting those applications.
Mm-hmm.
My oldest is a junior, or yeah, she's going to be a senior next year.
Mm-hmm.
So quickly following behind you.
Yeah, it's a big deal, big transition, and obviously a big expense. So we'll be talking about that.
Yeah, well, it is about that time, it looks like. So yes, today's topic of conversation is college planning and how we are saving for that. So lots of different ways to do this, but really, how do we fit college savings into that budget?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How do we fit it in with what we needed, with what we have, what we're doing right now? Anybody who has kids knows that kids are expensive already as it is.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to figure out how to do additional spending on top of that, specifically for that college expense, can be quite a bit.
Yep, absolutely. And we do find that happens a lot when a lot of our clients get to that point. They're trying to shell it out of pocket for college expenses, and depending on where the kid's going to school, it can get quite expensive. As you can see with all the different icons here, there's a lot of expenses that come into play, not just tuition.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially when you're thinking high school age kids, whatnot, cars, got new drivers now, still making mortgage payments, probably still saving for retirement. I think that's one question that we get quite a bit of is, how do we save for college while we're still saving for retirement?
Yeah.
I've seen it a couple of times where it's actually, people really want to save for college, but it actually is a little bit detrimental to their retirement picture when they do it. So trying to find that overall balance there, right?
Yeah, and prioritizing too. I think figuring out like what's most important, and hopefully you can attack those simultaneously. But we talk a lot about Dave Ramsey's baby steps, and the baby steps for a reason, because sometimes you kind of go back and forth a little bit depending on what your priorities are. So it is important to figure out what's most important right now. And sometimes when push comes to shove, one thing does take precedence over the other. So every situation is different. Every situation is a little bit different when it comes to clients and how we would advise you how to deal with this stuff.
Absolutely. So really, when it comes down to it, though, the biggest factor here is, of course, the cost of college, right? So whether it's a public college, whether it's a private college, they are expensive, right?
Yeah.
And the fact is we now there's a lot of different ways of thinking about this, but we tend to say that, anywhere from 5 to 6% growth rate in just the cost of college per year. Which if you think about it, that's a pretty big bump.
It is.
Right,
Yeah, it's
each
usually
year.
much more than normal inflation. College inflation is about double.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. So yeah, even a public college, you might be spending, 22,000 a year or 23,000 a year, just to have your kid attend. Private, probably double that at the very least. And then you throw, 5%, 6% cost on that 4 years down the road, especially if you're looking at what college costs now and you have a 1-year-old. Now you're thinking about what that's going to do 5 or 6% over the next 17, 18 years.
right. Absolutely. And just our closest university here in northern Colorado, we've got lots of universities actually within pretty close proximity, but Colorado State University, it's about 30 a year right now. If you figure everything, and again, everything would be room, board, tuition fees, books, supplies, laptop, kind of everything that a typical college student would need, about 30 grand a year right now. That's in-state tuition.
Yeah, and then you think about a 4-year degree.
Yeah,
that's a chunk of change,
Yep,
right?
it
So
is.
brings up the question, so how are we going to pay, right? We have various things available: college savings, financial aid, income, work study. I know I worked a work study job every year that I was in college. Various ways of borrowing, et cetera, right? Gifts from grandparents, although one of those
Hopefully.
things, it's nice to have, but you don't really want to count on it.
Yeah, you want to
because
plant
don't
that
really
seed.
know.
Hopefully, grandparents help out, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So really with any kind of savings though, it comes down to setting that savings goal. So whatever it is, how can we fit this into the budget? Is that $100 a month? Is that $300 a month? Really kind of almost working backwards, I think is what we take a look at it, is saying, where do we want this to be? What kind of, which we do a lot of, right, with clients, to say, where do you want your kid to go to school? What time is that? We figure out what that cost is going to be, and then we have to work backwards to say, well, what do you need to be saving now in order to meet that at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. And you might feel like, hey, that's too much. I'm not able to afford that right now. One thing to consider at least is that the more you do now, though, even if it's not enough to cover 100% of it, it's that much less that you'll have to be paying out of pocket, or your student will be paying out of pocket when they actually get into college. So everybody's a little bit different. Everybody's objective is different. People value this differently. Sometimes people say, yeah, whatever, wherever my kid can qualify, I'll pay it, no matter how expensive it is. Sometimes, and that's fine if that's what you want to do and you can afford it. And other people say, you know what, I had to pay my way through college, and they will too, right? So it's kind of all over the board as far as people's values.
The really tough part is when you have one spouse that comes from one side of the tracks and the other spouse who comes from the other. And so it comes down to this, so what are we going to do? We're going to pay for all of it. We're going to pay for half of it. We want some buy-in from our kids so that they don't take their education as a slough. So, and that's different for everybody. So you just got to kind of try to figure out what works best for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are your options then for college savings? So I think the one that comes first and foremost to most people's minds is a 529 plan, in large part because it has the most, it's the best tax savings tool, most tax advantages of pretty much any of these plans, right?
Right. At least that will allow you to put a lot of money in.
Absolutely.
Right. Sometimes there are things, and then you figure out, oh, really, that's all I can do.
Yeah. Right. For instance, a Coverdell, also another type of education savings account. But I don't know if many people know this, but a Coverdell actually, you're limited to $2,000 per year that you can put into that.
It's not going to go very far.
Right.
No,
absolutely.
For a lot of people's goals anyway, that's not going to go very far.
Yeah, especially looking at costs of these things, talking about a $20,000 per year, even public school. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
that's up there.
It's a big deal. If you really believe, and I believe the long-term numbers are probably that 5-6% college inflation. And then you think about, well, wherever my investments are, how much could they earn over time? 5 or 6%. I mean, that's not that unrealistic that might be your long-term rate of return, especially if you're making those investments more conservative as the student gets closer to college.
Yeah.
Your average rate of return might be that 5-6% range, which means at best, you're not really growing your money. You're just kind of breaking even, right? With keeping track with inflation.
Keeping track with it.
Yeah.
So which is why, things like mutual funds, stocks, ETFs, those are right up there as well. People say, well, why do I want to put it into a 529? I'll use the mutual funds or something, keep track, maybe I can get a better rate of return. Sure, that might be okay if you start out with X amount of dollars that you put in there, right? And then keep pace with it, but it's just another venue of it. Just like savings accounts, money markets, CDs, those get a little bit tougher because you don't get any rate of return out of those really.
Yeah, right now you do.
Maybe some CDs, right? Yeah.
But normally, yeah, very low rates of
Very
return.
low rates of return. So that leans a lot heavier on the actual what you are putting away portion.
Yeah.
Another one out there that does have some benefits to it, Roth IRAs. There is a provision within Roth IRAs that you can take X amount of dollars out, use it for education costs.
Yeah.
In a tax-free way.
Yep, absolutely. And there's some more gotchas that we'll talk about later with Roth IRAs. Sometimes they could be used in conjunction with the 529s.
Absolutely. So really, then it comes down to, okay, so you just gave me a whole list of all of these different types of vehicles that I can use to save for college. What's the difference, right? What
Yeah.
makes it, what makes one better than the other? Really, it just comes down to taxability, right? 529, if you use a 529 for higher education expenses, which if you don't know is a pretty broad category of expenses when it really comes down to it. Everything is basically tax-free. So everything you put in, all of the earnings on top of it, it's all tax exempt. Plus, while you're putting in, you actually get a state tax deduction if you are paying into the plan inside of your state.
In Colorado.
In Colorado,
Yes.
Each
Yep.
state is a little bit different on that. So for instance, if you're doing it in Texas, not a lot of benefit to
No,
doing
there's
the
no
Texas
state income
plan,
tax,
there's
which
no state income
I'd
tax.
rather have no state income tax.
Yeah.
That actually, that sounds better.
Absolutely. So really, but as opposed to, say, for instance, just an individual account with mutual funds and ETFs in there. Anytime you place a sale inside of those and there's a capital gain, you're going to have to pay taxes on that capital gain.
Right.
Anytime you make sales in there. So that kind of takes away from whatever's in that account.
Yeah, or any dividends or interest, same thing.
Anything,
any kind of gains that you'd have, even if you're not recognizing them and you don't see the money, it could be that those are being taxed.
Yep, each year as it goes along. So it kind of can complicate a few things a little bit. So what is a 529 plan? We just kind of said it, right? A tax advantage plan sponsored by states. Each state pretty much has their own plan that they do. There are some federal laws that they have to follow in order to be called a 529 plan. But really, it's up to the states to create them and use them, make them do their thing.
We kind of call it a, not that it's exactly this way, right? We'll do an asterisk here. Kind of like a 401k for college in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. It is, we think, one of the best ways to save for college because of those tax advantages. And there are a lot of rules, right? We certainly want to make sure that you understand that. They're not for everybody, but for a lot of people, these things are built flexible enough that it works out for a lot of people's situations. For our family, we've used 529s pretty extensively. Thankfully, they've been around for a while. So, for our littlest or for our oldest kids actually, and youngest kids both, we've had those 529s open since they were teeny tiny. So even if it's a small amount that you start with, you can always put more money in over time.
Absolutely. And just it's literally the one thing I think that's really built for college expense.
It is
specifically.
Yeah. Once in a while, Congress does something that is really effective and flexible. And actually, when they put that into place back in the 90s, I think is when the original legislation created these. That actually was something that's worked out very, very well in hindsight.
Absolutely. Another option, which is a little less known option, which was created, and correct me if I'm wrong, kind of the same time as a 529 plan, was basically a prepaid tuition plan. You don't really hear a lot about prepaid tuition plans anymore.
Not anymore. No.
Yeah, since 529s kind of came about and people realized the flexibility with 529 because it doesn't matter in which state you have it. It doesn't matter in which state the school is. You can use it for pretty much any of those, right? Whereas a prepaid tuition plan is pretty much you're picking a school and you're saying, hey, I want my kid to go to my alma mater. I'm just gonna, lock in some rates and prepay that tuition and there we go. But it does kind of lock it in. What if all of a sudden that kid doesn't want to go to their school, right? Or what if they want to become a welder? and don't want to go to college at all.
Right.
And then what happens to that tuition?
And I would add too, that I think where a lot of states, and Colorado is one of them actually, that used to have a prepaid tuition plan.
Mhm.
And why nobody wants to offer them anymore is the state administers these things and they figured out that's an awful lot of risk we're taking
Yeah.
by guaranteeing that the money you put in today is going to be enough to cover that same expense in the future. That's an awful lot of risk. You're passing
Yep.
that risk on to the state. They decided they didn't want to take on that risk, so they pretty much squashed them.
Absolutely.
So most states have just gone to the normal 529 college savings plan.
Yeah, and they say, hey, you guys save up for whatever you want. You do it on your end. You take all the risk.
And because yes, it's like a 401k for college, just like in your 401k at work, you're going to be selecting some type of investment option, and none of those investment options are guaranteed. They're always going to have some level of risk associated with them.
Yeah. So anytime the government can put the risk on you, they will absolutely do so.
Yes.
So really advantages, of course, to 529 plans. Anyone can open it. Doesn't matter if it's grandma, mom, uncle, whatever. High lifetime contributions. So there are some states, this can be different depending on the state that you're in, the amount that they will allow you to contribute. But typically what you see is you can control the funds that are inside of there. There's various funds, just like a 401k.
Absolutely.
That you can do. Age-based portfolios, if you don't know, is a portfolio that is literally based on the year that your kid was born. Starts out more aggressive, and then as the kid gets older and gets a little bit closer to actually using it, say age 18, 19, it becomes more and more kind of conservative over the life of the kid, so that you're not really risking the bank on that last year if there's a bad turn in the market.
Yeah, and then 2022 happened. And then stocks and bonds both went down. And typically that's where these things are going to be invested in, is some type of form of stocks and bonds. And yeah, usually usually bonds don't go down, but last year they sure did. So
absolutely.
Yeah, always risk associated with these things. But yeah, I'd say by far from what we see, age-based plans are by far the most popular. People kind of like that set it and forget it approach. They don't want to have to think about it later on, and again, risking that. Years ago, before 529s even started, early in my career, sometimes people would use their company's stock purchase plan or something like that to kind of save for college. And as you can imagine, especially in the dot-com crash, that did not work out so well, with the stock market dropping in 2000, 2001, 2002. A lot of people's college savings plans, a lot of value evaporated very quickly when they needed that money.
You're absolutely at the absolute worst time. So the nice thing about another nice thing I should say about 529 plans is there is what's called accelerated gifting. And so this is one that I think is one of the lesser known benefits of this. Is that there is the federal gifting guides, right? So actually the data on this is slightly outdated because they just updated this
17.
It's 17 now.
It is 17,000 a year.
So you can give 17,000 to a person per year. Your spouse can do the same thing. That is meaning basically you can give them $17,000 in cash or whatever. You don't have to fill out a gift tax receipt, anything like that. You don't get taxed on it. They don't get taxed on it. It's a allowable gift. Okay. With 529, what they do is they have basically a 5-year lump sum gift that you can in 1 year take that gifting amount. So for 2 people, 17,000. This is based off of last year's 16,000 amount. But you're up there in the 160, $170,000 range.
Gift.
You could drop that into a 529 in 1 year and just say, there's your gifting for the next 5 years, grandson, or however that works.
That would be a great gift. Again, your values are your values, but we're planting that seed right for grandparents to be helping out if they want to do that. And we do have a lot of clients that choose that. Certainly after they know that their own retirement is pretty secure, but they're kind of looking at other things like, hey, are there some trips I want to be able to fund, or helping with college education, or there are charitable organizations that I want to support. So all these things are certainly nice to have, but it doesn't have to be used just with parents. It could be grandparents or other family members.
Anybody can do it, which is very nice. But of course, like we were saying, returns aren't guaranteed. You are limited to the plan's investment portfolios. So just like a 401k, it's not the entire market that you have out there. There are specific investments within each plan that you can choose from. Like we were talking about, age-based plans. pretty much every 529 plan I've seen has an age-based option.
Yeah.
Within there, and then some others.
I think I've never seen one that doesn't. But
Yeah.
there might be, but I've never seen
Yeah,
one.
could be, but never seen one. There is a slight limit on how many times you can change the investments within the plan. It's
Yeah.
about 2 times a year, calendar year, that you can actually make adjustments to that if you
Yeah.
really need to.
Yeah.
But again, and of course, current rules say that if you do take withdrawals and it's not for qualified education expenses, which again is a really broad category, then you are subject to income tax and some potential fees on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one gotcha that kind of comes in here too. It's funny, the more you dig into the 529, you figure out how many kind of loopholes and kind of strategies that you can use around this. But you can only make 2 investment option changes per year. But the owner of the account, which is the parent or the grandparent, whoever opened it originally, that person's in control of the account. So let's say I wanted to day trade my kid's 529. I'm not suggesting that, but let's say that we wanted to make more changes than that. Well, the owner of the account can actually change the beneficiary as often as they want. And every time you change the beneficiary, you can change the investment option. Yes. So it's kind of crazy that the way that that this is designed. This is why we have jobs, right? Because this stuff is so complicated and the rules change constantly. But there's always, kind of a way, right? There are different ways depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. We firmly believe that there's always a way.
There's always a way. Yeah. And another one, again, kind of the date of what we're talking about here is this year, actually at the end of last year, Congress did pass another way out, basically another loophole out of that withdrawals section that says, if your kid does not use this and the account has to have been open for 15 years, they can actually use any remaining 529 funds towards their own Roth contributions. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's subject to whatever Roth contribution limits there are. You still have to have income, if I'm not mistaken, for that as well. But you can use the 529 funds for a Roth contribution.
Yep. And again, there's a lot of gotchas on that. So you want to be careful about how you do it. Make sure you follow the rules to do that. But yeah, it definitely made things more liberal as far as a lot of people's worry, of course, is they put money into the account. And well, what if they don't go to college or, something else, right? So that's one more way that it can be used if it doesn't get used for higher education expenses.
Just another way of making it a little bit more flexible.
Yeah.
So, of course, there are other options, covered else, like we said. They're still in use.
It's really rare that I see
one
one of
more
these.
few and far between. Every now and then someone will pop up with a covered L. In large part, I think because the $2,000 maximum contribution. The thing that sets a covered L apart is that you can use it for elementary.
True.
Which again, was it about last year, a little while back, the feds came out and said, hey, we're going to allow you to use some of your 529 funds for elementary up to a certain dollar amount.
Right.
They did leave it up to which states wanted to participate in that. And some states like Colorado opted out.
Correct.
Of that. So if you're still in Colorado, you can't use your 529 for any elementary costs. Covered L's you can, of course. So things like private elementary, private preschool, things of that nature, you can. Very similar. You select the investment that it goes into, tax-free earnings, any potential withdrawal that's not used for school, again, subject to penalties and potential fees.
Yeah. And one, gotcha here is if you were just dead set that, hey, I want to put my kids' college money into Apple stock. Again, not recommending that, but if you did that though, if that was what you wanted to do, the covered L would be one of the few options that you could actually do that since it's completely self-directed. The 529, again, think of it like a college savings plan, like a 401k, but for college. Think about it in that term that with that kind of a plan, if you're at your work 401k, they're going to have a limited menu of options, right, that you can select from, and you can decide high risk, low risk. You can do that in the 529, but you can't just select any given security. There would be more restrictions to that.
Yep. And covered L's are subject to income limits as well. So if you make too much money, you might not be able to contribute to a covered L. Whereas 529, you can make $20,000 a year. You can make 20 million. Doesn't matter. They're going to let you put money into it.
Yeah.
If you make 20 million, come talk.
That's a great problem to have. We hope we can help with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the other thing too is covered L's. Most financial institutions, we've noticed anyway, most financial institutions won't even open a covered L because they're a pain in the butt. They're a pain in the butt. They know people can't put very much money into them. They have all these rules associated with them. So sometimes you have to hunt and peck a little bit before you can find a bank or a brokerage firm that'll actually do this for you.
They are pretty few and far between
Yeah.
nowadays.
So enough of that.
And then there's of course Roth IRAs. I would say, yeah, this is an odd one in my mind to think of as a college savings
Yeah,
account.
typically not what we recommend for that, but
Yeah.
there are some ways though, right?
There are
Yeah.
ways, yeah.
Mhm.
So it's definitely not what a Roth IRA was designed for. Is designed for retirement
Mhm.
savings, after tax fund money. Um, there are some stipulations that if it's for a higher education, you can use it, especially if you're not 59 and a half yet, so you won't necessarily be penalized on it. Really though, I think the thing that some people use this for is because retirement accounts don't typically get counted on the free application for
Yep,
federal
true.
student aid.
Yeah, we'll dig into that in a bit. That's a
Yep.
good point.
So that's kind of one reason why I think it still qualifies under there. You're limited to the maximum contribution you can do every year. Again, this one bumped up, so it's I believe 7,500 if you're 50 or older now, 6,500 if you're under 50. But and again, if you make too much money, you can't contribute to a Roth IRA.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, and then of course, anytime you're using your Roth, you're literally robbing yourself of your own retirement accounts.
Yeah, and that's where these trade-offs come in. And sometimes people ask us about that is, well, if there's a trade-off here, not sure what I should do. Again, your values are your values. And so we'll never tell
Mhm.
you, this is what you've got to do, right? Or you should value this over that. It's up to you. So we're here to give you options, help educate you and guide you based on what your priorities are. But my personal opinion, there's a reason why on an airplane, they say you're supposed to put the oxygen mask on first, then your kid. That's kind of why, because there's no loan for retirement.
True.
There's nobody coming to bail you out, right, and to cover your retirement. Social Security is only going to go so far, and most people don't have a pension fund. So that's one thing to consider is that if there are trade-offs, you may really want to consider whether you want to reduce your retirement funds for college expenses.
Absolutely. I like that. There's no loan for retirement.
There's
That was
not
very
yet
true.
Anyway.
Right.
Hey, we've got $30 trillion in debt. You never know. That'll be the next thing that passes, right? That everybody gets free college. Hopefully that's the case, but I wouldn't count on it.
I'm not gonna hold my breath on that one. All right, so then the other option, of course, or another option is just mutual funds and stocks, right? So just basically like a taxable account that gets opened up, complete access to whatever's in the market.
Yep.
A lot of flexibility, variety there. No tax advantages whatsoever to doing this.
Yeah, and some people, that's the way that they go, and that's fine. Just know that, again, there's no tax advantages to it. And in the end, if the money was used for higher education expenses, you probably would have ended up with more money because of the tax benefits if you had it in a 529. So time is kind of the key, especially if you're doing this for younger kids, that can really add up over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because the tax code can change too. So we're in historic, never seen capital gains rates as low as they really are.
Yeah.
Right. So tax rates change all the time. So that could even be a bigger difference, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. What happens with capital gains. So which options are right for you? It depends on what you're really looking for. It depends on what your values are. 529 plans, when it comes to college savings, do tend to be the most flexible type instrument.
Yeah.
It's literally what they were designed to do.
They were, and they were actually designed well. Again, and I think it was kind of interesting how they designed it. Again, that the federal government put the law into place, but they basically left it to each individual state to administer it. So there are a lot of flexible pieces of this. If you don't like your own state's 529, we talked about that, right? You can use a different state's 529. You don't like the investment options in your state, or maybe you don't like the investment company that's managing that. That's all right. You can choose a different state's plan, and they can still go to school in a different state. So you could open up an Alaska 529 and be a Colorado resident, and your kid goes to school in Florida, and that's perfectly fine. Nobody cares. It's still going to be the same effect, other than the fact that if you're a Colorado resident, or many other states would give you that state income tax deduction. So that's one thing to consider, how much value that has for you. Yeah, and really it just kind of depends. Am I okay with being in this state's plan? Another thing is you're not limited to one 529 plan. Yeah, you have as many as you want. Multiple if you really want to. Check all the states out. You could. That'd be a lot of paperwork. A lot of statements to keep track of. More than I'd like to go through. Yeah. But really it comes down to that. It comes down to, how much control do you want to have over the investments?
really what is the overall goal of these funds.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, hypothetical family, couple kids, parents in their 40s, making a good income, want to make monthly contributions. What makes sense from that standpoint? So that's probably, average Joe American, hanging out there.
Could be.
Could be.
Yeah,
What makes most sense? Yeah, anything that's going to allow automatic monthly contributions, 529s are great. If you can still find a Coverdell and that suits your needs, you could use that. Roth IRA, again, kind of on the fence about that one. I wouldn't be, that wouldn't be my go-to.
Yeah.
For that,
yeah.
but you have options.
Because we're probably saying any money you are putting into Roth, you probably were meaning for retirement anyway. So
Exactly.
retirement's expensive. You think college is expensive, retirement's really expensive. So yeah, that's important.
And it goes a lot more than 4 years.
Yes,
Right.
we hope.
Absolutely. So, saving for college, how are you going to pay? Really, when we have this conversation with clients, it's, if you get on the game and you have the resources, college savings, it can be enough. I think for the majority of people, it's probably a combination of factors.
Absolutely.
Right? So maybe there is some gifts from grandparents, maybe there's some financial aid that gets involved in there. The thing is it's not necessarily one or the other. You can do a combination of all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great book, by the way, that comes to mind. It's called Debt Free Degree. If you go to RamseySolutions.com, it's actually a book that comes out of Dave Ramsey Resources, but it is what it says, right? It's not false advertising. It's, it talks about how do you get through college without your kid having student loans. And sometimes there's not a choice, right? Sometimes, that really is the smartest thing to do. But I think all things equal, if there's a way to get out of college without having student loans, most people would prefer to do that. And again, lots of talk over the last couple of years about student loan forgiveness and that sort of thing. I wouldn't count on that, especially if it's something not within your control. If it's within the government's control, don't want to count on that. It might work in your favor, and we're always looking at the rules. Of course, we're looking at things like this, tax advantages, things that we can kind of use to our advantage, but you never want to count on them.
Yeah, and there are programs out there, like if you're a public teacher or so, and,
Yeah.
you got to follow their rules. And there is some forms of student loan forgiveness out there, but the more you can avoid it, the better off you are.
Yeah, it's a good point. And it brings us to financial aid and grants and so forth. We actually had a client that she went to nursing school, and then after she got done with nursing school, she went and worked in a rural area, kind of a high need area that didn't have a lot of nurses, and she actually did get her student loans forgiven because of that.
Absolutely. Yep. So what is financial aid? Obviously, so I think most people think financial aid and they go to loans, like government loans. There are also, grants, scholarships. We were talking about work study earlier. I don't know about you, but when I was in school, I definitely had the work study job, going through trying to earn some keep in there, right?
Yeah,
So
I probably should have. I worked at a grocery store, but maybe I should have worked at the library or something, right?
Yeah, you can study while you work. It's a pretty great thing. So, but really this comes in a lot of different forms, right? And so if you're not familiar with it, basically what you do is you fill out the FAFSA, pre-application for federal student aid. They've actually come out with a new one. This is the first year for the new FAFSA. I have not seen it yet, but it's supposed to be a lot more simple. Not 28 pages anymore, I believe. But really what they do is they take that and they say, okay, what do you qualify for based off of what you make, what your parents make, etc. So federal grants, college grants, all kinds of calculators get determined in this. What kind of, there's a family aspect to the FAFSA as well, and financial aid about how much, basically, where do you come from and how much do you have
expected
behind you?
Family contribution.
That's
I
right.
think is the terminology for it.
Yeah.
Which some people say, well, that's not fair. For example, in families that say, you know what, again, I paid for my own college and I didn't, my parents paid for part of it, but in some cases, I had to pay my way through college. So you're going to too. It doesn't matter. They're still going to look at what they expect your family to contribute, but that's just the rules. We're just operating within the law and what the rules will allow.
Absolutely. And actually, I think with the new FAFSA, they actually did change that terminology.
Okay,
Expected family contribution. I think it's still a factor in there. They just renamed it.
Yeah.
Because apparently expected family contribution was not, people didn't like that.
No.
Yep. So, but things that are excluded from that, again, from the family side, home equity, retirement accounts, life insurance cash values.
Mhm.
So it's not like they're trying to rob you blind or
Mhm.
anything like that. There's stuff in there that they're not
Sure,
going to look at.
some of
but
them probably are.
yeah, well,
Politicians.
could
Right,
be.
yeah.
Absolutely. So there's plenty of things that get excluded from the FAFSA. But really, when it comes down to it, again, the biggest factor on this, if you're not going for grants and you're not going for scholarships, is going to be those loans, which is where all the, all the throwing up in arms is right now.
Yeah,
About how much those
absolutely.
loans are and how long it takes you to pay them back.
Yeah.
If you're, doing that for your whole.
Yeah,
career.
believe me, I mean, Jeremy, now we've sat down with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people and seen financial situations, and yeah, there have been some big student loans we've seen from
Absolutely.
people that, especially if they get out of medical school or law school or something
Yeah.
like that, has some really big ticket stuff to pay back
Absolutely.
for sure.
Yeah, and it takes a long time to get out of that for most people, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, and again, sometimes there's no way around it. So I don't feel like we're judging you, but all things equal, most people would prefer to exit their education without student loans or with as little as possible.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway is beware of excessive loans.
Yeah.
So some student loans or parent plus loans, things like that, they can be okay. Just be aware of how much you're accumulating and have a plan for getting out of it eventually. Right. So how much should you rely on financial aid? Again, different for everybody, right? We all come from different means. Again, I wouldn't rely too heavily on the loan package if you can. The more time you give towards focusing on savings and doing things proactively, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing to consider too is that kind of outside the box stuff, but these days, because of the low unemployment rate, a lot of employers, I won't even name names right now because it could change, right? But some big companies, that you would know the names, some of the biggest companies in the world actually will pay your tuition or pay at least part of your tuition, sometimes 2 years, sometimes 4 year, and they'll cover all of it as long as you work for them in college. One company happens to be one of the biggest companies in the world, but I actually just looked it up on their site, and after 90 days of employment, they'll actually start covering up to 100% of tuition. So
that is a great benefit.
It's a big deal. So you might even
Absolutely.
consider, if your kid's going to be working in college now, you might have them look into that, because the employer, not only will they get paid something, right, to cover their
cost of living stuff.
going to Chick-fil-A, whatever else they're doing, but they could get their tuition covered.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So keep your eyes out. Benefits all over the place. I would say kind of the last real conversation that we usually have to have with clients is, hey, I really want to save for college, but I can't save for college and retirement.
Right.
So what do I pick? And kind of like you said earlier, right? There are no loans for retirement.
No. It's our opinion. We can play with what ifs, and sometimes there is a little bit of push and shove, right? Because sometimes people would kind of look at the numbers and say, well, gosh, but if I worked one more year, maybe that would actually do it. Maybe it would just be one more year that you would have to work, and you might slightly reduce the retirement contribution you're making. Some of these trade-offs, of course, you may be willing to make, really depending on your own values, the things that you want. So it's our job to help you see what's possible. We like numbers, as you can imagine. We like spreadsheets and numbers and playing what if. So it's our job as financial planners to be able to kind of strategize with you and use all these tools. When we do webinars and things like this, that's the whole goal is education, because we think that ultimately you need to be somewhat involved, right, in your finances. Even if you do have a financial planner, I think it's important that you understand this stuff so you're able to make educated decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So really, it just kind of, there's never one or the other, or hardly ever, I should say, one or the other that you have to choose. There's usually multiple ways out of it. And that's why people like us have jobs, right?
Yeah.
Because we can say, well, you can do this, or you can do that, or you can do a combination of these things.
Absolutely.
And that is how we get you to your goals.
Yeah, show you the options. One question that we often get as we get into the Q&A here is really, what should I be focused on? Should I put in a lump sum? Should I put money in every month? We're big fans of automated investing. In other words, when you're saving for retirement, you're saving for college, you're saving for whatever. Studies have shown you're much more likely to get there if you automate it, if you have something that just automatically gets pulled out of your paycheck, out of your checking account every month. So that's why crunching those numbers is so important, and all these things, retirement, college. So that is one common question is, should I put in a lump sum? Should I automate it and do monthly? Well, if you can do a lump sum, that's great. But in most cases, people are doing some kind of an ongoing contribution, and all the 529 plans allow that. They allow for just an automatic draw, sometimes from your paycheck at work, but most of the time it would be a draw from your bank account.
Yeah, I agree. If you can automate it, the better off you are. You also get the benefit of dollar cost averaging into the market. So it's a lot less of an issue if I have $50,000 that I want to drop into it, but maybe the market's crazy right now and I don't feel really great about that. You do it a little bit monthly, you're going to get the average of the market over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And if for those of you who are wondering, gosh, I feel like my budget's pretty tight, especially with inflation the last couple of years. One thing to consider is that 529s, most of the plans have very, very low minimums just to get the account opened. So that would be one suggestion that you should consider is maybe I just need to get something opened right now. And some of them will allow you to go as low as $25 a month as far as an automated pull from your checking account. Well, most of us can find $25, right? No matter what you make, if you eliminate some Starbucks or something like that, right? It could be some amount that you're putting in, and then you can always ramp it up over time. If you started at $25 a month and make it a goal that every few months I'm going to raise it by another $25, it's automatically just going to be increasing over time to the point that that automated goal might just be happening without you having to feel too much pain.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Q&A time. Please use the question and answer feature at the bottom of your screen if you do have any questions. If you are not one of the lucky people who's watching this live with us right now, you can always just get a hold of us. KeystoneFinancial.com has all of our information. Again, we are a comprehensive financial planner. So really there's not an aspect of your financial life that we don't look at and help you plan for along the way. Here is also more of our contact information. So Josh at KeystoneFinancial.com and I am Jeremy at KeystoneFinancial.com as well.
Yeah, we try to be pretty responsive and available. So it's pretty rare that you wouldn't hear from us within 24 hours. So if there's something that you really want to look at your own personal financial situation, or maybe it's not even you, maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a friend, somebody else that they really want to dig into this stuff, feel free to make an email introduction. That oftentimes is an easy way to do it. Or just pass this webinar on. We'll have a link to it, of course, on our YouTube page as always. Yeah, that is where we keep a lot of our presentations. We also have the podcast, so we cover a lot of the stuff on the podcast as well, different questions, and financial issues, and interesting people that we interview. That's just at wiserfinancialadvisor.com.
Yeah, and we got a big team of people, support staff and CFPs on staff to help you out. So always someone here to help answer the phones and get back to you quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and our team is here to serve you. We are a fiduciary. We're here to work in your best interest. And we're really here to know you and your family. We get feedback. Sometimes we ask people, like, why do you do business with us? And sometimes, well, once in a while, it's because we think you can get higher returns or something like that. Usually it's not about that. And of course, that's our goal, right, is to do well and to get good results for people. But usually it comes down to it's because I need somebody who I can trust. And I need somebody who can really look at my situation objectively and help me make good decisions. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so it really is a relationship. It's a kind of a unique relationship because it's so high trust, and the fact that we're confidential and we're not your family, we're not your spouse, we're not your coworker, we're not your boss, we're another caring voice, right, that actually can speak into what's going on and tell you what we would do, right, or what we're seeing.
Absolutely. So I don't see any questions yet. Any parting thoughts?
I don't think so. No, I think it's just one other financial issue to dig into. Hopefully this uncovered some different strategies and thoughts. Certainly it wasn't here to solve every aspect of college planning. As you can tell, there's a lot of nuances to it. Again, good job security for us. As usual, the financial world is very complicated and the rules change constantly. So certainly let us know if you've got questions on your own. Hopefully this was helpful today, and we hope you have a great day.
Yeah, everybody have a great day.
Take care.